Today's topic is business structures and legal consideration for new businesses. And as you're probably aware, this is part of a series of webinars we've been running as part of the Elevate programme from Waltham Forest. Basically, a bit about Elevate, just so you know. This is a free advice and guidance and practical business support service from the London Borough of Waltham Forest for small businesses, sole traders, freelancers, social enterprises and charities. And what we've been doing over the past few months is running webinars on various business issues and also one-to-one sessions where you can get individual one-to-one advice with an advisor. So just in case either of you are not aware of this, you can always go back onto the website where you book this and book a one-to-one session. But basically, it's all about helping small businesses with business issues. So today's session is going to be hopefully quite fun, and we're going to cover some legal issues, but hopefully things that are practical that can help you in your business. So as I explained, this is the title of today's webinar, but perhaps you might want to talk a little bit about yourself, Jill, before we get started. I mean, how did you hear about this program and why did you sign up to this webinar? Hello, nice to see you. Hi.
Oh, nice to see you too. Okay, so my name is Gillian White. I am the founder of Cherry Tree Learning Centre. I follow Hustle and Heels on Instagram, but I was introduced to them a couple of years ago before lockdown by a friend of mine who is also in the line of business. And I was working for a different organisation at the time. And she suggested that she said, right, we're going on this link tonight, so get yourself together. So that's how I discovered Hustle and Heels and the information that they have shared. And, you know, I've sort of been one of those silent followers, I guess, for the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. So my business launched last August, the 29th, Sunday the 29th. And we are an education and adult training services provider online. So everything we do is online. So we provide educational services for children from the age of 6 to 16. We provide workshops for young people from the age of 16 to 21. And we provide adult training services for people over the age of 19 plus.
Right, okay.
So that's, there are, and we also have other additional services, but that's basically what we do. And in terms of the educational services, we provide tutorials. One of the things we do, we provide workshops for children, free workshops for children, which include things like how to build their confidence, cookery classes, and we also provide tutorials in English, maths, science, and we've just introduced a new subject, which is Chinese, Mandarin. So yes, so that's just a little overview of what I've been doing for the past 8 months. And the reason why this is so important to me to be on here is because at the moment I'm working as a sole trader, and I'm really interested in what is out there. I'm interested in becoming a KIC, a CIC.
CIC, okay.
Either that or a social enterprise. I actually thought that KIC was under the banner of social enterprise. I didn't realize it was a different legal structure. Social enterprise was a different legal structure. I've only found that out lately. So this is perfect for me because I just need to know what my options are.
Okay.
And what I need to do next.
Okay, great. Well, yes, we're going to come to that. So I'm so glad you gave us all that. I say us, me, all of that. So hopefully we will cover that, and we'll have a lot of discussions about some of the differences between the structures and maybe the pros and cons. So sure, that's what we're going to cover today.
Thank you.
Right, so let's get started. So I'll talk a little bit about me. I'm a workshop facilitator for Hustle and Heels. And Hustle and Heels is a social enterprise. I think, Jill, you know Hustle and Heels. But it's actually a social enterprise that supports underrepresented entrepreneurs to start, improve and grow their businesses. And we do this through events, workshops and programs via our Hustle and Heels website, our Instagram and our various social media channels. I'm actually an independent brand and business consultant, and I specialize in development, communications and marketing. And the industries I've worked in specifically are the food and beauty and fragrance industries. But I work with Hustle and Heels on I do various presentations and workshops for them. So Hustle and Heels are delivering these webinars in conjunction and on behalf of Elevate. So we're not Elevate, but we're working with them. So we're working very closely. And there's a lot of overlap because, of course, in Hustle and Heels, we work with a lot of startups as well. So this is right up our street. So today, what we're going to really look at are some of the key business structures here in the UK. I won't cover all of them, but I'll cover most of the main ones. I mean, Jill, you know most of them already, and I'm sure you do, Rosie. But we'll just sort of talk about what they call features and benefits, if you like, of these structures. And then we'll talk about some of the legal responsibilities that you may have as a business owner. And some of these responsibilities are related to the structure. And some of them will be responsibilities that you'll have to have depending on the type of business that you've got. So we'll talk about that element as well. We'll then talk, really hopefully answering your question, Jill, about how to select the most appropriate structure for your business. And then we'll talk about, I'll give you some examples as well. I'm trying, because it's a legal stroke business seminar, it's difficult to come up with lots of really active activities, but we'll be doing some case studies and just talking about things that have happened in businesses so we can use those as examples so you can see sort of things that have gone well and some things that didn't go so well. Okay. And then at the end, there'll be a list of resources and contacts that you could use if you wanted to, investigate further. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll jump straight in. So now the title of this is Business Structures and Legal Considerations. And it had to be quite clear because the business structures are actually the legal structures. But they're also a way of describing different types of company or business entity. So for example, you're all probably aware that you can operate as a sole trader. It's possible to operate in a partnership. Then there's various types of limited company, which we'll go into. And then we have social enterprise, and I've put / community interest company, also because, as you rightly say, Jill, and I think people think of social enterprise as a structure, but actually, as you understood as well, within the banner of social enterprise, i.e. businesses that work with a business objective that's going to have a social benefit, you can have different structures that can all be social enterprises. And we'll talk a bit more about it, but we're going to focus specifically on the community interest company because that is usually a structure that people who run social enterprises can use. Yeah, but it's not the only one. All right. Okay. And basically, and charities as well. So, for example, a charity could be a social enterprise. So to understand what these different legal structures are will help you to understand how you need to comply with any legal obligations that you will have as a business owner. All right. So let's get started. I want to have a discussion. What do you both think the most common legal business structure is in the UK? Any idea?
I think sole trader, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I've got some. It's when I'm looking for data, it's quite interesting because hang on, let me see if I'm gonna carry on with this, but I'm gonna try and I think I read a figure on one website that said for 2020, it was about 59% of the businesses in the UK were sole traders. Now, this was one figure. There's another figure that I've seen on the gov.co.uk website, which breaks down, it's actually a page that breaks down how the businesses in the UK are set up. So how many of them are sole traders, how many of them are employ 0 to 50 employees and so on and so forth. But long and short is definitely the sole trader is the most common structure. Why do you think that might be?
Is it because the small and micro businesses, there's so many of them?
Yeah, I think there's a factor. I think it's interesting to see what why that is just the one that people go for. I don't know.
I think, sorry, possibly as well, because again, it's considering all the elements that you need to be something else other than a sole trader is sometimes daunting, I guess, as well for people. It's just easier. It seems just an easier option to be a sole trader than to go through all of the hoops that you need to go through to become a different sort of a different kind of structure. If you don't have the information like what you're doing now, this is brilliant. But some people, if they don't have access to this, or they're not aware of platforms like this where they can get help to become something else, they may just feel like it's just easier to just carry on as a sole trader.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think the thing is, from what I've come across and what a lot of data would suggest, is that the sole trader structure is probably one of the ones that seems to be the easiest. And I think a lot of it is also, like you say, Jill, about people not knowing what all the options are. So they start off in business in a certain way and don't realize that maybe that way isn't necessarily the most convenient for them at that time or as their business evolves. So I think it's a factor that it's a lot easier, and I think there's not as much knowledge, but we'll see. But anyhow, we're now going to go into those structures, and when we look at the differences, and I've tried to just make it as simple as possible. When we see the differences, and as you say, Jill, we will see that there are benefits and disadvantages to being a sole trader or as opposed to being a limited company. So what I'm going to do is just introduce business and company structures, and then we're going to go into these structures in detail. So is a business always a large company with directors in suits? No. As you both well know, you can set up on your own as a sole trader, or you can form a partnership. Now, limited companies, as we're going to see, have many formats, but they can also be quite small. So alluding to what you were saying, Jill, it's possible to be in a very small group and still have a limited company, but if people don't know about that, they may stay as a sole trader. The thing with a limited company is that legally you need to have at least one director, and then you either have shareholders or you have guarantors, but they're always directors. And a limited company is a separate legal entity in law. Whereas if you're a sole trader or even as a partnership, you as an individual will take on all the financial responsibilities. So if there's any problem, any debts in the business, you're personally liable because you're not separate from the business. That's one of the things that you have to consider if you're going to set up as a sole trader. But we'll talk about that more. Now, the reason I mention that now is because some organizations will like to trade with a limited company because the limited company is more complicated to set up and has some legal backing. You're more protected when you're dealing with a limited company than you are when you're dealing with a sole trader. So sometimes sole traders find it difficult to get access to certain things because they're sole traders. And that's why some sole traders become limited companies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, but again, it really varies on your business and what you're trying to do. And finally, charities are another structure, but these get their funding through donations and grants. But all of this is to say that it isn't that complicated, but it's just to understand what the structures are and what your business needs. So I'm going to go through them all quite well, as quickly as we need to, but yes, a sole trader is an individual in business on their own. It is the easiest to set up, as it were. You have all the responsibility, you're personally responsible for any debts, any costs, any issues, because you're not separate from the business. However, to set up as a sole trader, you only need to register with HMRC. And ultimately, you do a self-assessment form, obviously, and you will pay income tax because you are not a company, it's just you. So there are no really strong legal requirements other than you do have to prepare accounts every year, but you don't have to be formally audited. And there's quite a bit of flexibility in how those accounts are done. So this is one of the things, I think the barrier to being a sole trader is so low that most people will set up like this. And I think that answers our first sort of question. So Jill, is there anything else that you can think of that I might have missed out?
For sole trader?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, I'm just being the bare bones. I haven't said everything, but what I'm doing is I'm going to use the same format for all of the structures so you can compare and contrast.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much, yeah, in terms of the structure, that's pretty much it really.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of
Yes.
as being a sole trader.
The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that if you are a sole trader and you're looking for investment, sometimes it's more difficult because you don't have the same protection as you would in a different structure. So,
Right,
you know, the sole trader often, because they're literally a person doing their own income tax, some companies might look at you slightly differently and maybe think of you as a more risky investment.
Yes, and I think that's the reason why I am now having to look at, as the company seems to be evolving, I've got to now be looking at other options of legal structures, because I'm finding that now I'm needing funding in order to be sustainable and carry on doing what I'm doing, because my organization is very much about giving back to the community. So some of those community projects, I need funding for them. And I've just started sort of delving into the world of trying to get funding. And I have been told exactly what you've just said recently, that, you know, maybe you're going to have to register with Companies House now, because if you want people's money, then they would prefer, a lot of investors would prefer that you are registered with Companies House as, you know, something else other than a sole trader. Although I've been told you will get funding, you can get grants, you can get assistance as a sole trader, but it will be much more limiting.
I think the other thing is that it's just because obviously if anything goes wrong in the business, you don't have anyone else that you can help you with the finance because of the legal structure you've got. So often it's a matter of they're covering their risk by seeing how secure you are, at least in law. So it's nothing personal. It's just that on paper, if something went wrong, you'd have to deal with all of that. Whereas in a different structure, there might be some more protection. I think that's a huge factor. But yes, it's interesting. But the flip side of that is there are some people who set up in business and think they have to go straight to be a limited company when perhaps they're not at that stage yet. You see what I mean? You've been trading and doing this for a while, you know, and you're seeing that it's growing. So I think sometimes as your company evolves, the structure may have to evolve, but you know. So let's see. So let's look at, this is another option that you might want to consider actually, Jill. The second one that we're going to talk about is a partnership. Now, this is actually just two or more, it's almost like two sole traders working together, if you like. You create a legal agreement as partners. So you would be sharing any profits in the business together, but each one of you would be responsible or liable for any debts or financial issues that arose in the business. Because again, the partnership is not separate from the business. You are the business. Do you see what I mean? So you would have to register with HMRC as a partnership. And again, you'd pay income tax, but you'd have to prepare your accounts in the same way as a sole trader. Again, there's no legal formal audit. So this might be a way to split some of the costs if you have a like-minded partner with a similar view, but the protection levels are the same as a sole trader. It's just that you're splitting it. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it does.
Okay, so that's one thing to consider. And then now I'm going to talk about a limited company. Now this is, I think when most people think about, I'm setting up a company, people tend to think about directors, you know, suits and having what I call a proper company. It's a business or company with several people. But in fact, you know, it doesn't actually have to be necessarily that big, but it does have a legal structure, a complicated legal structure. Firstly, as you said, a limited company you have to register at Companies House. And that's one of the main differences. So the directors of the company are selected, and when you register at Companies House, you state who the directors are, and you also have to explain who the shareholders are. Or if it's a limited company by guarantee, you have to explain who the guarantors are. And when a company is a limited company by guarantee, it just means that the funds come in from people or a company that guarantees finance for this business, funding for this business up to a certain level, okay? Whereas, of course, if you have shareholders, you have X amount of value and the shareholders will get the benefit if you make a profit. Either way, you need to have the directors. And these directors, they do the day-to-day running of the business. Now, as your company is limited, i.e. you're registered at Companies House, the amount of personal risk you have as a director and a shareholder is limited. So you won't have to necessarily pay all the funds if the company has an issue. There's a limit, and that protects you. And this goes back to what we were saying before about the difference between this kind of structure and a sole trader. But the flip side of being a limited company is that you have a lot more administration to do. So every year you have to prepare accounts, which is the same as a sole trader and a partnership. But the format of the accounts and the style of the accounts are set out in a legal way. And those accounts have to be audited. And that's a legal requirement for being a limited company. There are other legal requirements as well, but basically, I think when you're a limited company, you've got to accept that there's a lot more paperwork and admin and external eyes are on your business. You're less independent and less free, but as a result, you're protected and perhaps you seem more, I wouldn't say official because that's going to make sole traders look bad. No, it's just that there's a lot more paper behind what you're doing. Mm. And I think a lot of it is historic, Jill. Hello, oh, I've just seen that we have another person joining. So good afternoon. It's been a long morning. Good morning. Please feel free to join in and ask any questions and we can recap if you want. But I think I may have met Jacqueline before. So anyhow, a limited company is the first structure that we've talked about that has quite a lot of administration linked to its structure. And it's something to consider carefully as your business is growing. I'm going to talk about a very interesting case that I don't know if any of you would have heard of. I was actually talking about it with somebody the other day and I remembered it, but I didn't know much about it, so I had to go and look it up. This is a very large construction company called Carillion. And this would have been, I think, 2017, maybe 2018. But it was a very large company that was actually taking on contracts for building buildings, transport. It actually had I think part of the contract for the high-speed HS2 railway line that has been in the news for various reasons. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, this company had massive profits up into 2017, but somehow a year later, I may have the years wrong, so forgive me, it collapsed with £1.5 billion of debts. Now, obviously, it's a large company, so that figure might seem out of the blue, but it was a company that was making lots of money, doing really well. However, they had an external audit by one of the major accounting companies in the UK. And another thing that possibly I need to mention is that when you get to a certain size of company, there are even more restrictions on what you have to do as a limited company. So this would be a big legal issue, a huge company that would have to have the external audits done by somebody that actually comes into your business and looks at your figures in great detail. This audit happened, and yet a few months later, the business collapsed. This ordinarily wouldn't be an issue, but because it's a limited company, the actual bailout came from the government, which ultimately means it comes from the taxpayer. And yet the directors who should have been running the company, should have been on top of things, and should have seen there was a problem in the accounts, and the external auditors whose job it was to look at these accounts. And when these people come in and look at your accounts, I used to work for a very small company that had auditors that came in every year. They go in gory detail in all your accounts. They analyze everything. And even though it was a small company, in my case, they were there for about a week and a half. Now, this is a huge, massive company. So I imagine they would have had, truckloads of these auditors in the business of the company, looking at all the expenditure and everything that was going on, all the different contracts and so on and so forth. However, they didn't spot there was a problem. And in my experience, for a company to collapse, it won't necessarily happen overnight. You possibly could see the trends in high expenditure, low incoming. Lots of little things would have been red flags that should have been spotted. But because they were a limited company, these directors were not personally responsible for paying these debts. They had the protection of the company structure that meant that the money was paid back, but they didn't personally have to pay it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, it doesn't make sense to us as the public, but
yeah.
And I'm really glad that I was given this example, because it can happen in big companies as well as small companies. I think sometimes people feel that, it's really difficult for small companies and big companies are all protected and all this kind of stuff, but they follow the legal structure. They had the external audit over every year, and yet something was going wrong and it wasn't being spotted until somehow the whole house of cards came down. So if you want to be protected, think about incorporating your company if it's the right time. Okay, these are just examples. I can't obviously say what's right for every company, but if this had been any other structure, they would have really struggled. I think obviously when it gets the news, that people are going to question if the directors still get their payout and if the shareholders still get their payout. And I think there's a lot of hoo-ha about that. But your personal taxes are separate to the company, so you're fine, even if the company isn't. The concept I want to talk a little bit more about now then is this liability, which is, now I'm not a lawyer, so this is a term that I've tried to explain in a way that hopefully non-legal people can understand. But basically, liability is going to depend on the structure you've had. So I use that Carillion example as a perfect way. Their liability, their risk was limited. So liability can mean having legal responsibility for your actions. So if there's a law that you have to follow and you don't follow it, you are liable to A, whatever the outcome of not following it is, and B, any penalty that you may pay for non-compliance, okay? And liability can also refer to how much risk or exposure, often financial. So as I've said before, your sole trader will have personal liability for debts, but in a limited company, this exposure is limited, and that's why it's called a limited company. You will see liability as a word floating around a lot of the documents that explain the different structures, that explain legal elements of your business. So I just thought it's something that I would explain in simple terms. Obviously, if you need somebody to explain it in more legal terms, I'm not the one, but it's a really important concept to have in your mind. Am I liable, or is the business liable? And let's just remember that, the business is can be you or a group of people, but the company is separate to that. It's a legal structure. Yes. So the business and the company are not the same. Okay. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, Rosie, is that all quite clear?
Yep, great. Yep.
Good. Okay. Jacqueline, everything okay?
Yes. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Nana.
Did we meet before?
Yes.
I thought so. I recognized your name. How are you?
I'm good, Nana. Thank you.
Okay, good. Nice to see you again. So
Thank you.
I think you didn't miss too much, but we've just started talking, obviously, about the key business structures. But I'll be going back and forth, so I think I'll be able to recap a lot of things. But
Thank
if
you.
you have any questions, just jump in and ask, or jump in the chat, okay?
Thank you, Nana.
Okay, you're welcome. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about social enterprises. Actually, Jill, it's almost like I planted you, because when you're introducing yourself, and I know Jacqueline and Rosie probably didn't hear it, you were talking about social enterprise and understanding what social enterprise is, and the fact that it isn't just one structure.
Sure. Yes.
I don't want to go on and on and on, but I think there's a lot of people that think a social enterprise is a certain thing, and we don't actually realize that social enterprise is, I don't know if this is legally correct, but I'd say it's more like a concept, and then there are legal structures that can be a social enterprise. Do you see what I mean?
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyhow, this is what I've had to, I wanted to try and really research this so I could explain it clearly. So these are pictures of 3 companies that are social enterprises. Does anybody remember, these shoes, these little sort of deck shoes that people were wearing? Not anyone I know, but I've seen people wearing these deck shoes a few years back. And I was like, what are these? And do they ring a bell with anybody?
They look like Toms.
Toms, yeah, that's it, they're Toms.
Yeah.
And it's a social enterprise, and I didn't realize that. So I just tried to find companies that people may have heard of. But Tom's is, let me just see if I can.
I do know Divine.
Okay, you know the chocolate, brilliant.
I have eaten their dark chocolate before.
Yeah, any good?
Lovely.
Yeah.
Really good, actually, really good.
So Tom's are a sort of, I have to use my words carefully, but they're a social enterprise, and they focus on ethical impact and so on and so forth. I'm going to actually go onto I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to go onto, hold on, their website, because I think sometimes companies explain themselves better than people do. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to, here we go.
I love Toms. I have so many.
Do you really? Oh, well,
yeah.
you're the best person to talk to then. So did you realize there were social enterprise?
I live in them. I did, yeah.
Great.
I have size 9 feet, so there's not a lot of shoes that fit me. So Toms is my go-to.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they're very inclusive.
Right. Okay. This is great. Well, listen, I'm going to share my screen again, and I just wanted to go, and here we go, and break it up a little bit. So this is Tom's, for anyone who doesn't know them, and Rosie, who's very familiar with them. How long have they been around, would you say, Rosie?
Oh, well, I've been shopping from them for years.
Yeah.
I don't know when they started, but I've definitely had them a good 5, 6, maybe 7 years. So
yeah,
definitely a while.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think they've been around for a long time as well, but they only sort of started to get really trendy a while back. But anyhow, this is one example of a social enterprise. And then another one that I think I put on the website on my screen. Let me just go back to that. Here we go. The point I wanted to make is social enterprises, some of them we're aware of, but we don't necessarily realize that's what they do. Yeah. Here we go. So the whole point of a social enterprise is the business must have, the objective of the business is going to be a social objective, or it must benefit a community or group of people. Okay. But, so you've got Divine, and this water as well, Bellu Water, I don't know if anyone knows that. It's another company that sells mineral water, but the profits go to water aid. So a social enterprise is all about benefiting the community. However, there are different types of social enterprise structures, and the legal structures can be varied. One of the most common structures for social enterprise these days is a CIC, a community interest company. okay? And this has actually been designed with social enterprises in mind. So it has the same ethos, i.e. you've got to be benefiting a group of people or business by your, a community by your business, but there is a CIC regulator. So the CIC company, first, you have to be approved by the CIC regulator. You have to issue a document called a community interest statement. They guide you through how you have to create that. You have to create a constitution, and you also have to agree that the assets, i.e., the assets of the company, are used for social objectives. Okay, so I'll share a link later on, Jill. But
yes,
it's just understanding. Yes, you want to do create a social enterprise. I mean, yours is basically a social enterprise already. Which structure is beneficial for you, depending on the way you get funding and how you go with that. So that's a separate conversation, but it's something to bear in mind. But the CIC is a structure, but social enterprises come in different forms.
Nana, can you send me your email address, please?
I can do that a bit at the end, yes?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. So that's just very briefly talking about CICs and social enterprises. I also wanted to talk about charities. Now, a charity, we all know of charities, but it is the legal structure as well, a business structure. So charities also aim to fund their social mission usually, and they usually get their funding through grants and donations. Now, charities should operate really for charitable purposes and the public benefit. It doesn't have to be a social enterprise, but a social enterprise can be a charity. However, if you go down this route, you have to register with the Charity Commission. So you're registered as a charity, and there are steps that you have to take to do that. There are certain tax exemptions that you can get for being a charity. Any of the excess funds have to go back into the charity. And the governance, it's actually, charities are usually run by a group of volunteers who are called trustees. So it's a different setup to a CIC, but it doesn't mean that your social enterprise can't be a charity. You just have to register with the appropriate legal commission. So for charities, it's a charity commission. For CIC, it's a CIC.
But you can be the same charity and company the same time.
Well, it's a type of company. It's just got a different structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're still trying to make, you need money to finance the activities, but your objective is for a charitable purpose. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
But yeah, the Charity Commission will be very clear as to whether your idea is actually valid as a charity and whether how you're running the business fits into what they want. Okay, so they're always going to be helpful on that.
Okay.
Okay.
And could I also ask you, I've been in researching CICs, I've come across a statement that talks about being capped. So the profits that come into the company are capped. You can pay yourself a salary, but it mustn't exceed a certain amount, and the rest of the profit that you get coming back in, you must be able to show the regulator that you have put that back into initiatives and community projects. Is that correct?
From what I understand, they are looking to see, because a CIC, you can make profit. Social enterprises don't have to be not for profit. You can be, it's like a limited company, but it's a special type of limited company. But what they want to do is see that those profits are going back into the social enterprise. So my understanding, and I'm not the expert on this, but my understanding is that they don't want, if you do really well as a social enterprise, they don't want the directors and the founders to make loads of money and the money not go back into the social enterprise. So that's where I understand it, but I can always get some more info for you on that.
Yes,
but that's, again, it's a kind of slight limit. If you're a limited company, but you have a social objective, how much money you make and how much profit you make, that's your own. But because you're signing up as a CIC, they will be looking at all of those factors.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So it's like nothing's for free.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a discussion topic. I'm just going to put this out there, just something for you to think about. We can discuss it a little bit more later because I've got some more examples. But based on what we've just talked about, just start thinking about the structure that suits your specific business. And even in your head, you might want to put this in the chat, but just think about 3 pros and cons of a limited company. Not necessarily to share with the group, but just to have in your mind. Because I think not everybody needs to have a limited company, but I think because it's an important structure, just consider the benefits of a limited company and the downsides. I think that would help you then see if any of that applies to your business. Okay, so this is more like a thinking exercise, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So I've tried to cover what I think are the main structures that you need to be aware of. But this sort of second part is where we're going to talk about what I call legal considerations. So there are going to be some laws that you may need to comply with, no matter what your business is. And then there's some laws that are relevant to the specific business you're in. But either way, you need to be aware of these. And like you were saying before, Jill, I think if people don't know enough about what's out there, they're not sure what their options are. So as a business owner, whichever structure you decide to go for, you have a legal duty to ensure compliance with some certain key regulations, okay? So things like, for example, health and safety at work legislation may apply to you. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But basically, if you, for example, have a factory, or if you're in a situation where your company produces something and people are using equipment or doing processes, you need to be able to have things in place that show that you've considered their health and safety, so that if anything does happen to them while they're working with you or for you, you are covered. That's just a very simple way of putting it, okay? UK data protection regulations and GDPR is something that we'll talk about, but it's going to affect most of us, because these days, data and use of data and how data is processed is something that is quite heavily regulated and affects more people than possibly we realize. Other things that you may want to consider are types of insurance, including public liability insurance or professional indemnity insurance. And another thing to consider is protecting your business or protecting your ideas by either trademarking or considering a way to look after copyrighting your intellectual property. So these are just some examples. There are loads of legal considerations, but it really is important that you sit and look at what would affect your business and inform yourself as to some of the laws that you might not be aware about. So let's talk about data. And I'm going to talk about this quickly, not because it's not important, but because it's so much. So basically, this is an act. I mean, basically, any one of us, whenever you go onto a website, the first thing it says is, this website has cookies. Do you accept or decline? And that's the way it was explained to me, that is all part of data protection, because the websites and the businesses need to ask our permission before they track us. And now they need to explain what and why they're tracking us, or what they call purposes. Do you accept purposes? Do you accept this? Do you accept data storing? That's all part of the data protection regulations. Now, I believe the data protection regulations, these are UK that are relevant to us, but there's a wider one across the EU. And even though we're not in the EU, we still fall under a lot of those regulations. So the Data Protection Act governs privacy and collection and use of information. And anyone handling data may have to comply and register with this office, which is called the Information Commissioner's Office. Now, briefly, these rules and regulations just depend on how you use the data collected. But the issue is, what is data? Basically, data is, for example, when you signed up to Eventbrite and to register for this webinar, you'd have to put in your name, you had to put in some details, correct?
Yes.
So that data is being processed, and the organizers have to make sure that they let you know, if you want to, how it's being recorded, what they're doing with the data. And you have to give them permission to hold on to that data. But there are restrictions as to what they can do with that data. And basically, data processing, I put it in inverted commas because it's like a legal term now. As long as somebody stores your data, records it, analyzes it, or even deletes it, that is seen as processing within this law. So actually, even as a sole trader, if you're emailing your customers or emailing suppliers and taking a record of some of that data, it's as simple as that, you're actually processing. Or if you have employees and you're handling employee data, which of course you will do, you are processing it. So I would suggest, and again, I'm not a data protection officer or an expert on this, but there is a website that it's really worth checking out, and it's called ico.org.uk. And basically, they have a lot of information about what is data protection, what is data processing, how does this affect you as a sole trader? Do you see what I mean? And you have to understand what your obligations are, your specific obligations are, and then what you have to do. Depending on what you do, you may have to register with them or you might not. But these days you have to be able to know that you've done this. It's not okay to say, oh, it doesn't affect me, I won't look at it, because this law is everywhere. Okay, so it's nothing dramatic, it's just something that we should be aware of. And a few years ago, it wasn't necessarily that big. So this will affect nearly every business. I am going to, how are we doing for time? I wanted to show you a little video about a lady who had an issue with Mango. You know Mango, the massive fashion brand. There's a lady who has this company called Mangotree Kids, and it's about education for children. And because she wanted to trademark the Mangotree Kids name, she put in an official application to trademark the name. Now, some of these large companies will have a team of lawyers looking at any application or anybody who might infringe on the trademark they had. And even though the company was called Mango, they challenged the application by Mangotree Kids to trademark Mangotree. And this is quite interesting because it sort of brings up one of these issues that is quite interesting.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I am the founder of Mangotree Kids. And we're a company that for the last 2 years has been going through a trademark case with the retail giant Mango, who are opposing our application to register our trademark Mangotree Kids. We're a company that's been in existence for over 20 years, and the company is about teaching children about their culture and helping them to have a greater sense of self and love for themselves through their culture, and for all children to love and respect each other's cultures. And we do this through our African drumming parties, our cultural costumes and outfits, and our products that we sell, the dolls and the books, and our range of educational resources. And Mango are a fashion brand. I personally don't see the confusion, but they feel the need to oppose my application. So today we went to a hearing, and I was hoping that I would get the opportunity to talk about my brand and show the differences, and that there is no confusion. But it wasn't the case. It was all very legal and done through our legal representation. It's going to take about 2 weeks to get the results. So in the meantime, I just want to thank everybody that took the time today to actually log on and listen to the hearing, but also for the last 2 years, everybody that's been giving me that encouragement to pursue this, because it is quite intimidating.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there purely because of time. But I think I hope that it's clear what was going on. I just think that it's quite interesting that a small company who's been going for quite a while was being, challenged by a very large company. But again, they were doing the right thing by trying to protect their company. But sometimes by doing this, you could alert other people of your, when you do an application like that, it's not hidden. So the lawyers for Mango would see this and say, no, you know something, we should get involved. So it's not something that you can stop anyone doing, but the importance of protecting your business and your intellectual property is something that you may not think about at the beginning, but it's one of those things that you should maybe consider at some point. So that was really where I wanted to go. Okay.
Quick question.
Sure.
What was the result in the end? Because you've left me in suspense there.
That's a great answer, Rosie. I don't actually know is the answer, because
I think she was successful actually in opposing it. Yeah, she was successful in opposing it. There's a later video showing her thanks to everyone for support. So yeah, really good outcome for her.
Fab. Thanks, Jay. There you go. So it's but I mean, it's just probably something that was quite stressful that she really, when you're running a business, you've got enough to think about. You now have to deal with this challenge when you're actually hopefully doing the right thing by protecting it. But I've seen it happen before where people just think, why is this happening? Why have they got time to challenge me? Why aren't they just running their business? They're doing fashion and we're doing, children. But anyway, so let's go back to this. I wanted to talk now about what I call industry specific laws. So depending on the industry you're in, there are going to be some specific laws that you will have to adhere to, irrespective of the structure of your business. So this is just a very general sort of advice slide, as it were, to sort of say, consider the business that you're in, the area that you're in. If you want to understand which laws apply to you, I recommend that you look at any association or governing body. Do you see what I mean? For that particular industry, for some information. There will be information on their websites. Even if you're not a member, they'll give you guidelines as to who to go to, what you need to adhere to. You should be able to find out the specific laws, any qualifications and standards that apply to you in this industry area. Now, some of these may not be laws. For example, if you're an accountant, you don't legally have to have got a certain qualification. However, without that qualification, you may not be able to practice. Do you see what I mean? So it might not be a legal requirement, but it might be what we call best practice. Or it might be that without one piece of paper, you can't do X, but you need to make yourself aware of these things. So try and be sure that you know where to go to for guidance and clarification. And this is just general because it varies from business to business, but it's really important. Okay. So I'm going to give an example. I made this name up. I don't know if there's a business called Veganlicious, and if they find me, there'll be an intellectual property challenge, but I don't think they'll be watching this presentation. However, the case study I've just put together is a lady called Sasha, who she makes vegan pastries and treats. Now, she has access to a fully functional bakery, and this isn't her full-time job, but she's working on it. And she delivers to her local area and has great sales. Now, my question to you all, based on some of the things we've discussed about, is which laws do you think may apply to her business? Just literally 2 minutes.
Food hygiene.
Okay, yeah. Excellent. Anything else?
GDPR.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? I mean, there's no rights and wrongs, but you've homed in on the main ones. Food hygiene would be massive. And she may even need to have the environmental health coming to visit her on a regular basis as a result of the food hygiene laws. There may be other laws about, I think, in the food industry, for example, there's certain items that you make that legally have to weigh a certain amount for you to be able to call them this and blah, blah, blah. So that's more like trading standards, but that will be there. But food hygiene, she may need to have some laws. She may have other people in the bakery with her. I'd like to think she has somebody helping her. So she may have employees. So there might be some employee laws she needs to be aware of. But this is just a quick example of, yes, it's a business, but it's a food business. So let's find out what applies to food businesses and she may be hiring temporary staff, so there might be different laws. But yeah, it's that kind of thing that we need to think about for our own businesses, and just to be sure we're covered. I think these days it's difficult to justify not being able to find the info because it's all out there, but sometimes we just don't know where to look. Okay, I think it's a great name, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. So, so if I want to put this back to you and your specific businesses, so where do you think you can find laws that apply to your specific businesses? Or is there an industry body or association for your area? Jill, what do you think?
I think, well, where I found laws and policies and procedures, I Googled for some, and I went on to other organizations doing similar to what I'm doing. Although it might not be online, but there were still some aspects and policies that were similar to what I would need. So I went on to research just to see what kind of policies they had, and then sort of looked into those policies to decide whether or not they were relevant to my business.
Yeah.
So I used Google, I went on and compared other businesses. My background is law, so I was able. So I was able to get some to have some conversations with some of my other friends and colleagues as well, just to make sure. So I have, to date anyway, 11 policies and procedures and laws that apply to what I'm doing, and so I have to take the time to make sure that everything, to basically create my own policies and procedures based on the information I had been given and the templates that are out there, and just tailor make it to Cherry Tree.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, isn't it? It's not like, and many of the webinars that we give on different issues, we give people advice, but of course, every individual business will have some elements that are unique to them. So yes, you'll do some basic things because you've got this structure and you've got to do this as a business owner, but because your area is unique and how you run your centre is unique, it puts some more onus on you, unfortunately. And I think that's the thing with some of the legal elements. The onus is actually on you to know which law. It's not automatic, which makes it difficult.
Yes, and I had to really look for the ones that apply to online trading, because it's different to the ones, obviously, that are where you've got a structure that you go into and deliver. It's different. So public liability was not necessarily applicable to me, but other areas in relation to online tutoring and teaching, and protecting my tutors and presenters, that was applicable to me. And I had to look for that, those.
Definitely.
Jill, can you help me with,
Well, once you we can discuss what your business is, and then based on that, I'm sure you could, connect and, see.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this is general for everybody, but it's really, really important because, and I think, Jill, you make a great point that there's a lot of specific areas that are related to being online. And because more of us are doing certain things online, we need to be aware that teaching or providing workshops face-to-face has different implications to delivering them regularly online. Even if they're for children online, there's still going to be things that you have to do. So it's very industry specific, but it's really important. I wouldn't have wanted to talk about legal things without actually focusing on your industry. Otherwise, we're leaving half of it out. So the next thing I was going to say is, do you have employees? And again, people may be sole traders, but not everybody is a sole trader. But as a business that has employees, there will be responsibilities, legal responsibilities regarding employment law. So contracts, employees, liability insurance. Also, Jill, for example, as you say, as you grow, now you have tutors. So they may not be employees, but they're still contracts. They're contractors. So that is a type of an element of employment law that one would have to consider.
Yes.
And then the flip side is, of course, how you pay people. So the payroll, pay as you earn, and national insurance. These are all things that as a business owner, you have to inform yourself about. Data processing and GDPR, we talked about it, but specifically for employees. And things like DBS checks, background checks, if you're working with young people or hiring people to work with young people or vulnerable people. These are things that you just have to be aware of. And the information is there, but as you said, as we keep saying, you have to almost, if you don't know where to find it, you have to almost know who you can ask to help you find it.
Yes.
Yeah, who can help you with DBS check?
Yes. Again, it depends on your business. I mean, if somebody's got a bakery, they may not need a DBS check for everybody, but then it depends. Sometimes you want to be sure who you're working with. So
Nana, I'm pastor of the church for a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I was doing DBS before with CVS.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So you know a lot about it.
Yeah, but now I don't know. I don't know where, because I'm doing also volunteer. But now I cannot go near children because of DBS. I need to check where and how. I don't know.
Yeah, and again, there's going to be places you can find out what you need to do and what you need to check. But it's just sort of just doing some investigation.
Okay.
So I also wanted to just say, these are things, again, like the other discussion topic too, I just wanted to leave you with a thought that start to think about the practical aspects of business that may have legal implications. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And just think about how confident you are about your legal knowledge. We don't all have to be lawyers, thank goodness, but we need to be aware of how we can access that information. Literally, just like you were saying, Jacqueline, so the area of, I say law or maybe practical knowledge that we don't have expertise in, we need to find that expertise. And these days we can Google, we can ask other people, but just be clear what is relevant for you, what you do know, what you think you need to know, and try and find out where you can source that information.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, some practical issues, which I think have legal consequences, are to do with where you work. So for example, if you own your place of work, there's certain things you need to consider, and Jill mentioned them. If you work from home, there are other things. So we talked about health and safety at work before, in terms of if you have a factory or you're baking or something like that. But obviously, if you own a premises, you have to consider the health and safety element at that venue, okay, for you and your workers. Public liability insurance, you mentioned that, Jill. It's not relevant for you usually if you're not retailing or trading in a physical way. But there might be other insurances that you need to be, like a professional indemnity insurance, for example, you may need, depending on what type of service you're providing, if you're online.
Right.
If you do have a physical premises, or even the business, certain industries require you to register either the premises, or they require somebody to inspect the premises to be sure that you're legally acceptable to conduct that business in the premises. That's happening less and less because a lot of people are going online. But because people are going online sometimes, and then they start to become in-house, they might not consider that part. Do you see what I mean? So it's very important. And then there's some activities that need a license. So again, these are what I call practical issues, but there will be legal consequences if you don't comply, or if you're not even aware that you can't necessarily, I don't know, pierce people's bodies in your home without a license. I know that for a fact that you need a license to do tattooing and piercing, and I think you need to register the premises. I'm not sure about that, but you definitely need a license. So working from home as a sole trader doesn't mean that you don't need to think about the legal elements of certain aspects of what you do. Okay. So again, another general thing, but this is more to plant the seed in your mind. Another little quick sort of quiz for you is, this is another case study. Again, Caroline is a made up lady. I don't know anyone who does nails like that, unfortunately. I wish I did. But this is Caroline, who's a full-time lady who works and has a busy family life, but she still managed to do nails and lashes on the side. Now she's working from home and she wants to grow and create a business. But which structure would be best for her right now and why? What do you think?
Maybe sole trader.
Mm-hmm. Why do you say that, Rosie?
Because she has a very busy life.
Yes.
And yeah, going into the legal and director of a limited company might be a little bit too stressful. So starting off as a sole trader might be ideal for her. And then maybe later on go to limited.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I think that's what a lot of people need to consider, but they necessarily don't, you know, because you just said something really important, and then maybe later on, which is almost like the stage that Jill's at, you know, you start off, you don't have much time for all the admin and everything, but you need to do the business, you need to have some elements of it. But as you grow, I think, look at evolving the structure. So yeah, I think that's, sorry, Jill?
I was just about, sorry, I meant to add as well that I think as well, it's good, as Rosie said, to start as a sole trader, because especially for Caroline, because she says she wants to grow and create a business. So initially it's about making sure, well, seeing if it's viable. Does it work?
Yeah.
You know, will she get customers? Will she get, you know, will she get regular customers? Whether it's, first of all, family and friends, and who then share the information to other people, and then that goes on to other platforms, etc.
Yeah.
So I think there's a ripple effect there when starting a business. So it's about making sure that it's viable first, before then considering the other legal structures. Because if it's not viable and you jump straight into becoming, say, a limited company, then you know, you might find it, she could find it more of an uncomfortable process, as opposed to being what it should be, which is, you know, you start a business, you want to really enjoy it, don't you? You want to get into it and all of that. So I think it's her starting as a sole trader, first of all, to see whether it's viable. Does it actually, is there a need for what she's offering?
Yeah. Do you know what? I think you've covered all the things I'm going to talk about now. And that's exactly what I think a lot of people struggle with, is A, getting the business to be viable, and B, having the right structure to start with, or reviewing the structure you've got and saying, actually, you know, I was, for example, I was speaking to a lady who has a similar business to Caroline, actually, but she was thinking about going limited only because it was difficult for her to get work with some of the suppliers, because they said, we don't want to work with a sole trader, you know. And then there was another person I knew who did something similar, but wanted that independence, and to see if, when they built up the business, and then they could go limited. So it just depends. But I think it's to see if it's viable financially and in any other way. Because like Rosie was saying, the time involved in the admin for being a limited company could be time that's coming out of your side, you know, hustle time. So it's just weighing up the pros and cons. So yeah, I think, you know, you ladies have really understood this, and I'm just going to summarize again which structure is best. So if it's a growing business, if you want to be independent, if you want minimal admin, or you have time for minimal admin, and you are quite willing to take on the financial liabilities, that's the other thing that you have to work out. With the flexibility comes the risk. Then a sole trader is possibly for you. However, if you are growing and you're okay to take the admin, and you want the status of a company, you want to be able to trade with people who are confident that you're not going to go under and disappear, and you want to protect yourself, then I would say it's a limited company. But there's a lot of steps between one and the other. And then I'm only going to talk about social enterprise here. But if you have a social objective, if you're happy to do a CIC statement, there is quite a lot of admin, but that gives you some protection, because this structure really fits in quite well for social enterprises. And you have limited liability, because a CIC is ultimately a limited company within the social enterprise world. Then that would be what to think about. But going back to what we've said before, it's really about what's relevant, what's viable for what you're doing. So just to wrap up, really, I would say to select a structure, please get informed about the legal aspects pertaining to your business and the industry. Each business is different, so do your research.
What is the difference between self-employee and a sole trader?
Okay. That's a really good question. You can be self-employed as an individual. Actually, maybe I should get a tax person to understand. What I understand is that you can be self-employed for the way you work, but it doesn't mean you're set up as a sole trader. Yes. Okay. But I believe, and maybe Jill can correct me, that if you are a sole trader, you will have to register as self-employed. That's my understanding. But I don't know, Jill, does that make sense?
It was, yes, it's something that sort of confused me for a while, because I was thinking, okay, so when do you transition from being a sole trader to self-employed? That's been my question. And that's still my question. When do you transition from that? Because it seems as though on the government website, when you go from being a sole trader to self-employed, on the government website, they want you to register as self-employed. So it seems to be a completely different process. You can't just be self-employed and I thought I could just transition and be self-employed and be known as self-employed. How naive was I? Somebody said, no, check the government website. And the government website specifies that if you're self-employed, then you need to let them know. You need to actually fill out a form.
Okay, I can help you with that, Jill. I can help you with that.
Oh, good.
You could, just briefly, just from my own experience, yes. You can be self-employed without being a sole trader.
You can be self-employed without being a sole trader, yeah. But not the other way around.
That I can't tell you. All I know is that you can be self-employed, because there's some people who are self-employed and are just self-employed. I think that's you as an individual. But remember, sole trader is a structure.
Right, yes.
The company. It's a type of company. So you can be an individual, because a self-assessment and being self-employed means that you pay income tax on anything you earn. Okay?
Yes.
Right? As sole trader, you pay income tax, but you're a company. So does that make sense? So I think being self-employed is about you, but if you have a company, you can be a sole trader, partnership, all the things we've talked about relate to companies.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That much I can clarify. Any more, I would need an expert. Yeah.
That helps.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the thing is, Jacqueline, to answer your question, as an individual, you can be self-employed. If you want to create a company or a business, you would then have to decide which structure. And if you register as a sole trader, you go to HMRC, yes, and you still pay income tax, but income tax for that company. If you then wanted to incorporate and go to be a limited company, then you'd have to register at Companies House. So self-employed is relating to self, but if you're looking at the company, you have to be clear that the company can be yourself as well.
Okay. Well done.
Yeah, so it's tricky. I'm learning more about it all the time. What I would say is in the wrap up is, yes, you've got to comply. You've got to find ways to protect your finances to sustain the business, which is what you were saying before, Jill, and then get advice for the best practices of your industry and business in general. Because when you combine all these elements, you're going to be sort of professional. But it is not straightforward without you doing the research. Okay. Just a quick one. Again, it's really important that you consider the fact that complying and protecting your business and understanding the best practice is going to lead to a very professional way to run your business, no matter which structure. Some other questions that you might want to consider, I've got here about accountancy, bank accounts, and so on and so forth. And if you want more help, we have, as part of the Elevate program, we have several business advisors, okay? Jill, I think the person who probably would help you the best is Andrea, because she set up a CIC and she could really help you and answer a lot of the questions.
Okay.
So this is the slide that we've got, but when you go back onto the website where you book these, you will find out more about the Elevate one-to-one program.
Yes.
If you go on the Waltham Forest website. So for all of you, please go on the website And if you want, you can book one-to-ones, and they're about 40, it's about an hour long. You book with one of us, and we talk through your business, we ask you questions, and we can actually help with some really specific areas you've got. So Jacqueline, if you were interested, you could book with me if you wanted. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for coming. And everyone has been super interactive, so that's been great.